Yeah, I'm feeling more organized just by being on this podcast today. Between Mr. Doug Peterson and our friend Debbie Rosemont's commercial, it's feeling pretty awesome. Well, welcome back to the show. I'm your host Dan Edwards with Seattle's Eastside Real Estate Team podcast. I'm going to welcome back to the show Elisia Howard. Elisia is the founder and CEO of College Insights. This is a private college consulting company based in the greater Seattle area. She has a master's in education, specializing in education policy, and is a certified college counselor, and is the only certified financial aid advisor in Washington State. She's been in education for almost 19 years and worked in college admissions for almost 10. Elisia has been featured in a number of news outlets and podcasts, and is frequently invited to speak at high schools, community organizations, and businesses throughout the U.S. Elisia, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Okay, I'm going to pitch the same question that all of our guests have got in. Share with us a holiday memory that you have from your childhood.
There's many, but I would say there was this one year, and I was probably like 11, maybe 12, and our Christmas tree died like 2 weeks before Christmas, and it was very sad, and we had to take it out. It was all rotted and stuff, and I was like, well, what are we going to do for our new Christmas tree? And my parents were like, I mean, now I understand as an adult, they're like too busy to deal with it. So, but they're like, we're just not going to have one. And like my 11-year-old mind couldn't fathom not having a Christmas tree when the presents were there.
Yeah.
And so I just decided I was not going to have any of that. And so my older sister, I made her take me to Fred Meyer and get a new tree. And she had this like old boat of a car, right? It used to be our great grandparents' car.
Awesome.
And so we just like shoved this tree in the back of this car. I don't even know how we got that thing in. And then I somehow figured out how to put it up. I have no idea to this day how I got that tree up when I was 11 by myself.
What did your parents say?
And I decorated it and everything. It was beautiful.
Nice.
And my mom came home and was like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that.
That is awesome. That's an epic story. Way to go. Like you were just kind of a take charge person at that point. That there was no going back from that, right?
I mean, that's just my personality anyway. So I just was like, no, we're not having that. We have to have a tree. So
yeah,
make it happen, right?
Right. That's awesome. All right. So Elisia, let's talk about the steps to the college planning process. Let's share with our listeners. What are the steps?
So there's 4 steps to the college planning process. So step 1 is, I'm a junior in high school or sophomore, wherever you're at in that phase. And I'm looking to go to college, but I'm not really sure, what that looks like or what to do. Maybe I have a couple schools in mind. But you really want to start with what I call that college list process, which is of the 4,000 universities in the US, which ones are you going to ultimately apply to, which is like somewhere in the 8 to 10 range. And so that is kind of a process I'll work with students is, if you kind of know this is what I want to major in, I want to be at a school of a certain size, financially we have X much money to spend, right? All these different variables that go into it. You want to think of all of those and then come up with what will initially start as a larger list, right? Like 20, 30 schools is pretty normal to start with, and then you'll start narrowing it from there. So you'll kind of come up with that initial list of schools. Mm-hmm. Once we solidified that list of schools, we're going to go to step 2, which are all the essays, which is the longest part of the process. It takes me usually about 6 months to get through that with students because there's just so many essays. It used to be about 30 on average, but after COVID, I really saw schools kind of knock it down a bit. So this year I was seeing like 20 essays somewhere in there.
20 different types of essays.
Yeah, 20 different essays because it's your main essays, but you also have all the supplements. And so as you imagine, getting a 16-year-old through that many essays and they have sports and, all their other things. And so it takes some time. But we get through all of those essays. And then once essays are solid, we go on to the applications, which changed a lot actually too after COVID. But that's like getting transcripts in, your activity lists, like letters of recommendation. Now there's these weird A through G matching things at some schools. It's silly, but whatever. There's all these weird things. Applications take quite a lot of time. And then, of course, the financial aid process is number 4.
Number
So,
4. Okay. So, how can starting early in the college process save families money?
yes. So, like, I get a lot of calls every year that, my kid's already in college or got accepted to college, and, we're realizing tuition's high and we need some help figuring out how to do this. And that's fine, but it's limited of what we can do after they're already in college, right?
Yeah.
So if we can get to them before, right, like junior year of high school, sophomore year of high school, we actually can run all the numbers. We can be very strategic in how we're attacking this application process. We have time to start kind of conquering scholarships and taking advantage of, the money that's available. And a lot of the times we can save a ton of money and get it very affordable if we're strategic at the beginning of the process.
So
So,
it's by having more options the earlier you start, and to kind of consider budget constraints, location restraints, such stuff like that. And if you're doing it after the fact in phase, say even 1, so way before, you would want to do this before phase 1, right?
yeah, or right around that
As a part
time.
of that, as a part of that phase.
Yeah, like for example, there's some colleges where, like, if we would have started earlier, if the student got, like one college gave, it was like you get a $10,000 scholarship if you hit a 3.75 GPA, and I had a student who had like a 3.72, and so it was like, like if we would have started a little earlier, I would have told you that, and then we
Right.
could have made, there's all kinds of things we could have done, right, to try to boost
Targets
that
you get a hit
GPA.
for, look for extra credit, look for a way to kind of boost that, what classes you're
Mm,
taking as a junior and senior, right? So that you can help
yep,
keep your GPA up. So in
all
addition
those
to
things.
college planning, have you ever helped anybody get like scholarships or grants to pay for tuition and living expenses?
Oh yeah, all the time. That's all part of it. This year is actually so crazy because back in, when Congress passed the CARES Act with COVID, they expanded the Pell Grant, and so a lot of people who didn't qualify at all now qualify. But two, they opened extra funding for just people. Think of like people in unique situations, right? You were self-employed and your business got hit, and you had a kid in school, or you got furloughed, right, laid off. Like if your income was impacted by COVID, there's a bunch of extra money and grants for those people now. So, I mean, this year, I usually have a couple students go for free every year.
Hmm.
And then, of course, there's tons of scholarships in there. But this year in particular, with the expansion of funding, I'm seeing just crazy scholarships. I have a student right now getting, per quarter, she's getting about $2,500 extra. Like that's
Wow.
an overage, right? Because we got so many scholarships and grants.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
at the end of 4 years, she's actually going to have $32,000 in excess funding. That's tax-free funding.
Holy cow.
Um,
Invest in real estate. No.
no, actually, that's what we're doing. That's like the only thing I make my
Fantastic.
students promise. Is I said, we're putting that in like a fund for one day when she's older and ready to buy a house. She'll have a really nice down payment.
Just buy a bunch of Bitcoin. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Right.
I'm not an investment advisor. I'm just joking. Real estate, that's the best way to go.
Uh,
That's awesome. That is really cool. Now, what if your kid's already in college? Do you have any services that you offer for people with kids currently in college?
Yeah, we do. So when we're pulling funding to make school affordable, we're not just pulling it from one area, right? We're pulling funding from a lot of different areas. To get 5,000 here and 7,000 here, right? We're kind of adding up. So if they're already in school, we can still work on getting additional financial aid, which has now greatly expanded with COVID funding. And there's so many people who qualify. And even I don't want people to think it's like, oh, only people with no money. It's people with usually had really good businesses, and again,
Hmm.
they're like
Hmm.
impact, financially from COVID got hit. Like, so there's people who, like, they make good money, right, on paper, but there's loopholes. So there's money for financial aid. There's also scholarships out there. So we actually have like a whole scholarship research team. That's all they do all day is look for scholarships for kids. So um, you can always get scholarship funding as well when they're already in college. So
Well, I feel like this next question is one for Doug, but it's directed to you. Is when should you start saving for college?
When you're pregnant.
Right.
uh, I mean, I
Yeah.
know it's hard to do, right? Because you're, they get to college and you swear they were just born. But, right. My
Don't I
nephew
know it?
just turned 21. Actually, we went to Nashville a couple weeks ago for his 21st birthday. And I'm like, how did this happen? I just babysat you,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you're a grown man in Nashville. But it happens fast, right? So I think a lot of parents I work with, it's like you had a baby, you have a toddler, you're doing all the parent things of young kids, and you're paying for daycare, and you're probably not making as much at that time in your life. And then it's like, boom, they're teenagers and off to college. And so, like I always say, like just save as early as you possibly can, even if it's like $100 a
I
month.
was I was gonna say how
Um,
much. Yeah, $100 a month. Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
anything you can save, because I tell parents, I'm like, if I can at least have at least a year of funding, which in today's dollars is like 25, 30,000,
Mhm.
preferably more, preferably 2 years of funded college. We can make that stretch for 4 years, right?
Yeah,
But if you
and
come to me with nothing, it's a little harder.
is harder. And for the parents out there, I have to say Washington State has this Running Start program. Both of my kids did, and as a result, the amount of years they're spending at university is like almost in half, not quite,
Hmm.
but that was state sponsored. So I'm not saying it's free because the
Hmm.
state kind of allocates your funds from whatever high school you're from. But in Washington State, if you have the opportunity, if your kid's got the temperament to do Running Start, I mean, what a great way to save money on college for sure.
Yeah, and every state has something like that. They may
Okay.
call it something different, but Running Start actually predominantly got pushed after No Child Left Behind got passed.
Hmm.
And when people thought of No Child Left Behind back in the day, it was more that you thought of like, students who were behind, maybe had learning disabilities, right, whatever. But it's actually not. It's for every student. So gifted kids, as they called it back then, they didn't want gifted kids to not reach their potential because we were always catering to students who were struggling more. So every school had to create some sort of program, whether that was more AP classes at the time. Washington State came up with Running Start, but they had to have funding and programs in place for like your gifted kids, so they didn't fall behind.
So, Elisa, that brings me to a question. Can you help families of kids outside of Washington State, or are you only licensed to help people in Washington State?
Oh no, I work with students all over the world. I work with a lot of military families, stationed all over the world. I started actually in admissions when I lived in Korea. So my client base for a long time was all over China and Japan and Korea, Abu Dhabi, Dubai. And then I moved back to Seattle, where I'm from. But
Awesome. All right. So, if you have children that have graduated and have a student or parent loans, what can you do?
loans are great. So we want to make sure that for loans you're doing what you can to obviously pay as little as possible, right? Like if we can save you money, right? Nobody's going to say no to free money. So for loans, what a lot of people don't realize is that they talk about like forgiveness programs like it's one thing, and it's not. We
Hmm.
actually work with like well over 75 different forgiveness programs and strategies. And so a lot of people who have existing loans, right, they graduated, now are stuck with the debt. We want to create strategies so that you're repaying as little as you can, right? That could be through forgiveness programs and actually getting it forgiven. Sometimes that's tax free, sometimes it's not tax free. We can run the numbers on that, or through interest, right? So maybe we can save on some interest. There's all kinds of also new policies now too, where because universities were taking advantage of students, and so a lot of loans are getting
Hmm.
wiped out because basically like the students were defrauded and lied to.
Hmm.
Um, so, like for example, like do you know, like a couple of years ago, the Art Institute in Seattle shut down, and all the art institutes are being shut down now. But
I didn't even know that.
a lot of students took out loans, right, going to school, and that was completely illegal. They weren't supposed to be offering this certain
Oh,
types of funding.
oh. So
And
they were in
so,
violation of their license to give the loans. Therefore, the loans were no longer able to call them
mhm.
in. Wow.
Yeah, or when the school shut down, there's different rules with how, like if your school shut down, you couldn't graduate.
Right. Right.
right?
You
And
you were kind of
so
promised an education with that loan. Yeah.
yeah. So, and same if you've gotten like any kind of disabilities. I say disabilities that could be, with people going through like chemo treatments or, all kinds of medical issues. But there's a lot of rules around that's just a wipeout. Actually, you can just get that completely wiped out. So, all kinds of cool ways to deal with it. So, it's important to run numbers and have those conversations and see, what you can save in going about those loan repayment plans.
Awesome. Well, we're almost out of time, and we talked about typically. It sounds like you can work with anybody, but is there a typical type of family that you like working with?
I'd say typical is like junior in high school. Now that we're getting end of December, juniors will begin college planning in about February or so. So juniors in high school with parents that really, find the education piece to be important. They don't want to be behind. They don't want to be stressed about all their kids' essays and all the paperwork they're going to have to do. I really like to work with those students who they don't even have to be the greatest students. Like the GPA doesn't matter to me. Just a good, hardworking kid who wants to go to a good school, whatever that means for them, with the parent who is supportive of this process, right? So,
Right. So it definitely is. The parent support is always good, and that's
mhm.
fantastic. Alicia, how do parents and students get a hold of you?
They can go to my website, collegeinsights with an s.com. And from there, you can fill out a form, schedule an appointment right on the website for a consultation, as well as my number and email is on there as well.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today.
Great. Thank you for having me.